Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so excited to be able to chat with you and share some information on this really important topic for all of us. So, my name is Haley. I'm the Prevention Manager at Employee and Family Resources, and we recently were awarded a grant that focuses on adult alcohol misuse. And so, we thought this would be a great opportunity to really explore alcohol, discuss some signs and symptoms, some statistics, and really focus on these more in-depth conversations that we can utilize when we're thinking about maybe our children, maybe our colleagues, and how we can navigate this landscape that is associated with alcohol being legal, but also noting that there are consequences associated with high-risk usage. So I'm excited to dive into this topic with each of you. Please feel free to utilize the chat box if you have any questions at any time. I am more than happy to answer any questions that you may have or comments. Please feel free to drop them in there as well. So we're going to dive in and we're going to get started. So when we first look at alcohol, we want to acknowledge that a lot of times we think alcohol is alcohol, but in reality, one drink looks very different from another. And depending on what type of alcohol an individual is consuming, that is going to frame how many ounces is actually one standard drink. So we like to start all of these presentations by really noting what is one standard drink. So a little bit of information. It takes our bodies on average 1 hour to process out one standard drink. So if you look here, you'll see a variety of different types of alcohol and their measurements associated with what one standard drink is. So on the left-hand side, you'll see our beer there. So our beer has on average about 5% alcohol. And so a standard beer, let's say we're in Iowa, so we'll say Busch Light, 12 ounces, 1 can would be one standard drink. So on average, it would take our bodies 1 hour to process out one of these. Now, as we progress to the right-hand side, you'll see that the percentage of alcohol increases. As our alcohol percentage increases, the amount of ounces that are in a standard drink reduces. And so we get all the way to the right-hand side where we look at our spirits or our more hard liquor. And these are going to be things that have on average about 40% alcohol. And with that, 1.5 ounces is a standard drink. And so as we're looking at this, we can kind of think about what one standard drink is to us. Now, if you were to go to, let's say, a restaurant after work this evening and you were to order a margarita, now I'm getting 1 glass and my margarita is coming in 1 cup. However, if that bartender is following the bartender's guide, that 1 margarita is going to have 3 standard drinks in it, which to us in the public health realm means it should take an individual 3 hours to drink that margarita, and then also it's going to take their body at least 3 hours to process out that drink. Now, the majority of us don't think that way because this is 1 drink, right? I was given 1 drink and I'm going to drink that with my meal, probably not going to be there 3 hours, etc. But what we know is that this can help, or this can lead to higher risk usage because we aren't aware of the level of alcohol that is within that drink. Now, when we think a little bit even more in depth into different substances, maybe we order a Long Island iced tea. So per the bartender's guide, if someone were to order a Long Island iced tea, there is at least 5 standard drinks. So again, that is a really large amount of alcohol that is coming in 1 glass. And so if we were going to drink it the way we should drink a standard drink, that Long Island iced tea should last us at least 5 hours, which we know is not realistic. And so we're going to talk about what does this look like in our community and how do we keep these things in mind to make low risk choices for ourselves and for maybe the people that we are around. So I know not everybody loves statistics, but I am definitely a person who is drawn to statistics. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to be able to chat through what some of the statistics look like locally, and then also comparing and contrasting this information to the nation. And so we're going to start looking nationwide. So according to the 2021 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 174.3 million people 12 and older reported that they drank in the past year. So this is 62% of individuals in the age range of 12 and older. If we compare that to the state of Iowa, we have a lower rate than nationally. And then if we look at Polk County, again, also we have a lower rate. Looking at this same study as well, 133.1 million people aged 12 reported that they drank in the past month. So then that's looking about 47, 48% of that population. And so we really look at this and then we're able to kind of compare and contrast to see where are we at in comparison to national trends. And one of the things that we see is when we look at past year use, we actually have lower rates than the nation, but when we look at past month use, we have higher rates. And so that past month use is 47 to 48% nationally. If we look at the state of Iowa, we see 58%, so over half. And then if we look at the capital of our state, Polk County, we see 60%. And so there are some different trends that we're going to talk about in relation to this, but the Midwest has always been known for having higher rates of alcohol use and binge use. Additionally, when we look statewide, we note that 22% of adults in our state note that they had binge drink, and then 24% in Polk County. So again, comparing and contrasting, we're seeing higher rates in Polk County than in the state. Does this really represent easier access? Are we seeing a reduction in perception of harm? Is this there because maybe we have higher rates of, younger population or more colleges? There are a bunch of different things that we can utilize to interpret this data. But what's important to note is that our state does have a higher rate of past month and of binge drinking than the nation. Additionally, when we look at breaking it down a little bit more in depth nationwide, we see that the male population is more likely to have alcohol usage in the past month. So 50% of the male population noted that they drank alcohol in the past month. And then the female population, 45%. So about a 5% reduction over the male. And so we're really looking at this data to see, okay, what is this telling us? Where can we go forward from here? So as we look into what does it mean to be a responsible drinker, we really want to look at what is considered binge or excessive or heavy alcohol usage. And these terms are used fairly interchangeably, but there is some data to back up the different words that we're going to use. And so we're going to start with a focus around binge alcohol use. So binge drinking is a very serious public health concern, but the beautiful thing about this is it is fully preventable. So getting this information and this knowledge into population and individuals' hands can really help prevent this public health problem. So let's dive a little bit into this. What exactly is binge drinking? And how do we know if we have participated in this particular public health problem? So the term binge is used very loosely. So we hear that a lot in relation to maybe someone speaking about alcohol, maybe talking about watching their favorite Netflix show. So this is really something that we hear loosely and not necessarily defined. But when it comes to drinking alcohol in a binge fashion, there is some science and some specific metrics around it that we can use to ensure that we're making the healthiest choices for ourselves. So this looks like considering an individual's body makeup and how many substances they're consuming in a specific sitting. This is what we're going to look at in terms of binge drinking. So binge drinking itself is defined as a pattern of alcohol consumption that is going to bring our blood alcohol level to a level above a 0.08. And so this is where we look at that level at which an individual, if they're operating a heavy machine, could be given an OWI if they were operating a vehicle while impaired. So when we think about getting this level of blood alcohol concentration, we know that it usually corresponds with 5 or more drinks for men and 4 or more drinks for women on any given occasion. When we think about binge drinking in general, we know that 4 out of 5 binge drinks are consumed by the male population. So binge drinking is significantly more common in the male population than it is in the female population. And then additionally, we know that binge drinks are specifically over half of binge drinks are consumed by adults that are over 35. And so when we think about that, this is a big contrast to the specific population that we normally think about when we think about binge drinking. So when we go into groups and we talk about binge drinking, we are very commonly associating binge drinking with underage youth or college students. And while that is the case, we do see binge drinking happening in those settings. The majority of the binge drinking is actually associated with our adults who are 35 or older. Things to keep in mind when we think about binge drinking. Just because an individual is participating in binge alcohol use does not mean that they are dependent on alcohol. So when someone begins to misuse substances, an individual can develop 2 different types of dependence. One is going to be a physical dependence, which is where their body is physically telling them, I need this substance. If I'm not having this substance, I may feel ill without it. And then we also have psychological dependence, which is more of, I feel most comfortable when I have this substance, or I feel safer with it. Now, dependence, specifically psychological dependence in itself, is not something that's negative. We are all psychologically dependent on something. So for most of us, that's probably going to be family members, maybe our job, maybe friends. We have things that, we feel best if those are around us. So psychological dependence in and of itself is not a problem. However, when someone is psychologically dependent on a substance is where we really start to see more high-risk choices being completed. And this is where we start to note that an individual has more of a likelihood to develop alcoholism if they are continuing down that path of physical and psychological dependence on alcohol. When we look at this specific topic, we know that while dependence isn't necessary to have someone experience a binge use, we know that binging on alcohol itself can be very, very problematic. Based on the rates of binge drinking, we are seeing increased rates of alcohol-related traffic fatalities. We see binge drinking associated with diseases, and then additionally, the more someone is binging, the more likely they are to develop an alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. Over 90% of excessive drinkers binge drink. And so again, this is where we pull in these terms. So we see excessive drinkers. So drinking more than what is considered low risk is kind of what that is representing to us. So Who binge drinks? When we look at our specific population, we want to really narrow this in and talk about how this impacts our individuals and how we can be aware of this. So 1 in 6 U.S. adults binge drink, with 1 in 4 of these individuals over consuming at least once a week. And so we're seeing 1 in 6 about every month, 1 in 4 every week. And so this is a huge issue. We're seeing high rates of this, which is leading to higher rates of traffic fatalities, higher rates of different types of cancers, higher rates of other issues that happen associated with high risk alcohol use. And then something we noted earlier is that, again, men are more likely to binge drink than women, which is something that is very important to note. And then some statistic that really stands out when we think about binge drinking is that binge drinking is most common when we're looking at adults who have higher household incomes, so $75,000 or more. And these individuals are most commonly white and live in the Midwest. And so this is a very narrow population that we're really honing in on that is extremely more likely to binge drink than other populations. Heavy drinking. So we have two very different definitions. So we have binge drinking, and then we also have heavy drinking. So heavy drinking is basically one step down from binge drinking. So this is going to be defined as having 4 drinks in a day for men and 3 drinks in a day for women. So when we look at this drinking pattern, we know that if someone is participating in this 1 time per month, 1 out of 5 has an alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. Now, when we narrow that down to the population that has 1 heavy drinking day per week, 1 out of 3 of these individuals has alcoholism. And then getting even more narrow, when we look at the population that has 2 heavy drinking days per week, 1 out of 2 of these individuals has an alcohol use disorder. And so as we're seeing this increase in frequency of heavy alcohol use, we really start to see that influx in the rate of alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. So we've talked about all of these different things associated with heavy and binge alcohol use, but why does this matter? How does this impact me, and kind of what is that bottom line that we're looking for? Well, what we know is that the United States loses about $249 billion in economic costs associated with heavy drinking. This equates to right around $2.05 per drink for each individual when we're looking at this overall cost. So this cost is very, very large in terms of how the impacts that we're seeing on the nation. These costs come from things such as healthcare expenditures, lost work time, criminal justice costs, maybe even, other random things that we don't necessarily think of off the top of our head. Binge drinking itself accounted for 77% of these costs, and heavy alcohol use and standard alcohol use makes up the rest of it. And so we're really seeing this impact not only on the health realm of things, but also looking at kind of that economic impact associated with alcohol use. Additionally, some other things, we see 88,000 related deaths annually. These include traffic accidents, overdoses, accidents that may happen associated with alcohol usage. We also see that there are chronic conditions that are associated with alcohol usage, even in small levels. We see increased rates of cancer. In larger amounts, we're seeing increased rates of heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke risk. There are a lot of different chronic health conditions that are impacted by alcohol usage. So if we're going to talk about alcohol, we know that alcohol itself is legal. So what can we do to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones if someone is going to choose to drink. So we've talked about all of these different high risk levels of alcohol usage. However, we do know that there are some low risk options for individuals if they do want to consume alcohol. So some tips for an individual if they would like to drink responsibly is initially making sure that the individual has ate before they begin drinking. So most alcohol that an individual consumes is going to be absorbed through the small intestine. Some of this alcohol is also going to be absorbed through the mouth and a little bit through the stomach. But when an individual eats a full meal before they begin to drink, the rate at which that alcohol reaches the small intestine is slowed down. This really helps to taper that absorption to a pace that your body can manage a little bit easier. Consuming food when an individual is consuming alcohol can help increase the rate of alcohol elimination from our bloodstream by 25 to 45%. And so this really helps the body be able to process the alcohol better to not have an individual become impaired quite so quickly. The next harm reduction tip would be to stay hydrated. So alcohol in and of itself is a diuretic, which basically just means that it kind of pulls the water out of the system and increases the rate of an individual needing to urinate. So when someone is drinking alcohol, we see increased rates of dehydration. So in order to avoid this, we can see a dual purpose associated with drinking water while also consuming alcohol. So when we're drinking water, it gives our body time to process the alcohol that has been consumed. So if someone is having a drink, then drinking water, and then drinking another alcoholic beverage, we have some time in the middle for the body to begin to process that alcohol out, which can really be very beneficial for that consumer. Additionally, when we're drinking water, it helps to kind of alleviate some of that diuretic properties associated with the alcohol to avoid those really scary risks associated with dehydration. Dehydration in and of itself can cause a variety of different health problems: fatigue, dizziness, urinary tract infections, kidney stones, even up to seizures if we have high levels of dehydration. And so we really see a two-level process when it comes to staying hydrated between using substances. Another tip would be to avoid taking shots or drinking hard liquor. So when an individual drinks hard liquor, the alcohol has nothing to help avoid a straight absorption into the body. There's no other ingredients that are really helping to tailor this. And so when an individual drinks straight liquor, the alcohol levels go up significantly faster than someone who is, say, maybe drinking a mixed drink or a beer. So a harm reduction strategy would be to drink substances that are not hard liquor straight and avoid taking shots. Skip the drinking games. So this is a tip that some people don't necessarily love, right? So drinking games sometimes start different events. People maybe use these as like icebreakers. However, there is a lot of evidence that shows that drinking games can be super problematic for individuals who are consuming alcohol. So initially, drinking games are dangerous mainly because they encourage drinking a large amount of alcohol in a very small amount of time. As we discussed earlier, the body can really only process out one standard drink per hour. And so the more we're consuming, the higher the level of impairments that someone is going to see. The nature of these games can also be very impactful on the level of alcohol that someone is consuming. So really the gain is not necessarily that main focus. The amount of alcohol that someone is consuming is something that when we think about these drinking games is more important. So rather than any direct result of the game itself, the way we are taking on these high-risk behaviors is really where the danger associated with drinking games lives. So we see a variety of different issues associated with this, such as higher levels of binge drinking, increased risk of alcohol poisoning, increased risk of developing an alcohol use disorder over time, exposure to some negative consequences, and then we also see higher rates of long-term risk associated with alcohol usage. Our next tip would be to elect a designated driver. This one is going to be pretty straightforward. If we are not driving a vehicle while we are under the influence, that avoids some of those high-risk incidents such as traffic fatalities, car accidents in general, and then also the potential for an individual getting an OWI. Now, there are, other less exciting things associated with electing a designated driver. Maybe someone will choose to still use in a higher risk fashion, which still increases the risk for some of these other consequences. However, we can avoid some of those immediate things if we are utilizing a designated driver. And then only drinking in appropriate settings. So, when you're working from home, that is probably not an appropriate setting. And if we're thinking about settings that are appropriate, maybe these are going to be when we're out to dinner. Maybe this is at a celebration, things along those lines. So really ensuring that when we're using the alcohol, that it is in an appropriate setting and utilizing appropriate amounts so that our body does not experience these consequences associated with that alcohol usage. We're now going to talk about when having any alcohol, so any amount, can be too much. So the first thing is going to be when someone is taking a medication that interacts with alcohol. There are hundreds of medications that interact negatively with alcohol. Antibiotics, opioids, benzodiazepines, muscle relaxers. Those are just naming a few. Alcohol can really interfere with the absorption of these medications, and they can also, depending on the type of medication, enhance the effects of each other, which can be very problematic and can lead to overdoses from lower rates of alcohol use and lower rates of, let's say, antidepressant use. It can be very problematic. If an individual has medical conditions that are caused or made worse by the drinking, this is something in which a consultation with your physician may be the best bet to talk about. Does it make sense for me to use or avoid alcohol? So some examples that we give here are depression, anxiety, blood pressure, diabetes, kidney issues, cancer. If an individual is experiencing any of these conditions, this is going to be a decision that is best made in partnership with your physician as to whether this is a safe choice. If you're under the legal drinking age of 21, so we know that it is illegal in the United States to drink under the age of 21. This really comes down to that brain development. It is damaging to the brain to consume alcohol while it is still developing. And so it is best to not use alcohol if you are under the age of 21. We've talked a little bit about this one, but we should not use alcohol if we plan to drive or operate heavy machinery. And if someone is pregnant or if they are trying to conceive, this can impact a developing fetus, and it can also impact an individual's viability if they are attempting to try and conceive a baby. So these are some different things to keep in mind as well. Experiencing facial flushing or dizziness. So there is some really cool research that recently came out that links an enzyme that causes facial flushing or dizziness to alcohol-related cancers. And so for an individual who has this enzyme deficiency that has facial flushing or dizziness associated with alcohol usage, that individual is much more likely to develop alcohol-related cancers than someone who does not experience facial flushing or dizziness. And so, again, this is just something to keep in mind for yourself, that if you are one of the individuals who experience that facial flushing or dizziness associated with alcohol use, this could mean you're at an increased likelihood of those alcohol-related cancers. So now when we think about talking to our young people or people that we care about in relation to drinking, it's important to note that it is never too early to start having these conversations. When we are talking to our youth, specifically thinking about preschoolers or younger, we want to talk to them about our risk and protective factors. So really working with them to build up those protective factors while also reducing those risk factors. So let's talk to them about what is a healthy lifestyle. We'll talk to them about impulse control, emotion management, things along these lines that can really help an individual build up these protective factors that can protect them from these future peer pressures and decisions that they're going to be faced with. And then kind of on the exact opposite spectrum, it's also never too late to have these conversations. Maybe you have a teenager that's about to enter the workforce, or maybe they're about to go off to college. It is important to have these open and honest conversations with them to know that you are a supportive adult and that you are a safe space for them to come to be able to ask questions and know specifically that you're going to be there to support them. So some quick facts about underage alcohol usage. This comes directly from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is taken annually. So in the United States, 29% of high schoolers reported that they drank alcohol that past month, 14% binge drank, 5% drove after drinking, and 17% rode with a driver that had been drinking. These rates have been declining, which is very positive to hear. However, these statistics are still too high. We want to see these numbers significantly lower than they are. These give us great starting spots for how do we talk to our youth about this. So maybe this is a simple conversation about, we don't want to get into the car with someone who is under the influence. What is binge drinking? Why is it damaging for a youth to utilize alcohol? All of these different things and these statistics that we're seeing can be starting points for conversations with our older children, or even the adults in our life that we're maybe concerned about their substance usage. These facts can really be utilized to our benefit when we're trying to have these conversations. So some signs of alcohol usage here. I'm not going to read through all of them. A lot of these are you're probably fairly aware of them. Some things that we may see: decreased productivity, morning maintenance. So it takes them time to get up and maybe they have to use substances to wake up. Increasing that tolerance. So it's taking more of the substance for someone to be able to achieve those desired effects. These are all different potential signs that someone may be experiencing an alcohol use disorder, and we may want to have a conversation about their usage. So the dreaded situation, what do we do if maybe a teenager or a loved one who is under the age gets caught drinking? So this is something that none of us look forward to, but what do we do if it does happen? The key takeaway from this is to be prepared. It's better to know how we're going to manage this in prior to this event actually coming to fruition. So some really promising things that we should know is that teens who have a close supportive relationship with an adult in their life are much more likely to delay drinking. We also see a statistically significant decrease in teen alcohol usage and substance usage in general if they're having mealtime with their parents. So having that time where they're all coming together at dinner to have these conversations. We see very high rates of reduction in substance usage from these populations if they are having these positive relationships with their supportive adults. This, as it mentions here, really plays into that reduction in susceptibility to peer pressure, higher rates of self-esteem, and they also feel like there's a supportive adult there who we are able to ask questions to. So as we're navigating a situation like this, it's important to be that calm and empathetic person to work with our youth around this. So if this individual did participate in this, what gap were they trying to fill? Are they experiencing stress, higher levels than they're used to? Was there peer pressure there? Are they having communication challenges? Let's talk through these. How we can manage this is really focusing on being solution focused and using open-ended questions. So we know that sometimes punishment may be the easier option. However, research shows that having that supportive relationship with our children and with our loved ones is just as important, if not more important than these specific punishments. So we want to keep these lines of communication open with our youth, and again, being prepared in advance for boundary setting, having these conversations around what does this look like and how can we be that supportive adult while also ensuring that our youth are protected and safe. Finally, teens don't do as we say, they do as we do. We want to be able to model healthy behaviors in general. Specifically, when we're thinking about substances, modeling that healthy behavior is beyond important to ensure that we see that reduction in early onset alcohol use. And so being that supportive adult, keeping open lines of communication and ensuring that our teens feel safe to come to us can really change the dynamic and ensure that we're creating a safer space for our youth to be able to delay that onset of alcohol usage. And at that, I will turn it over to Johanna.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you everyone who joined us today. I just wanted to remind you, if you're listening and have EFR's EAP benefit, we are available 24/7, 365 to help you manage life's challenges. And this is for you and anyone in your household. You can call our 800 number. You'll be connected with a master's level counselor, and that individual will listen to you and help you identify some resources through EFR that could possibly help you with whatever's going on in your life. But an EAP benefit is really easy to use. It's one phone call. It is completely confidential. We're HIPAA compliant. We cannot report anything back to your employer. So I know that's one barrier that can really get in the way from making that phone call, but know that we're available 24/7, 365. And then the last thing I want to mention is that we have a benefit called TOGETHERALL. And if you scan this QR code, you'll be taken to a website where you can register for an online peer support platform. This is an anonymous platform where you're connected with people across the world who are experiencing shared life experiences. So, you know, as Haley was presenting this information today, a lot of it resonated with me because I have loved ones with substance use disorder, and I did really benefit from joining a peer support group to help me understand kind of the way I was responding to the circumstances was completely normal for someone living in those circumstances, and other people were experiencing very similar you know, relationship struggles and you know, just life challenges. And so I think sometimes people aren't ready to talk to a counselor. but they want to connect with people who can help them and who can understand. And sometimes people are connected with a counselor and they want something, you know, in between those sessions to just kind of keep them motivated to continue working on themselves. And so I think TOGETHERALL could be a really great solution. And you can opt into different support groups. So if the content today resonated and you are concerned about a loved one's drinking or your own drinking, there's cohorts for that within TOGETHERALL that you could join. So scan the QR code, get registered, and again, it's a completely anonymous platform where you can get or give help. If there are any questions, please enter them in the chat. Otherwise, we will let everyone go for the morning. But this was great information, Haley. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today. And I'm not seeing any questions, so we will let you go. And thank you so much, everyone. Make it a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.